On August 6, 2011, at 2:47 in the afternoon, a 38-year-old farmer named Derek Millhouse stood beside a Case IH Magnum 340 in the parking lot of the Livingston County Fairgrounds and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. The tractor was 6 weeks old. The paint still held its factory shine. The cab smelled like new vinyl and hydraulic fluid. 340 horsepower. Continuously variable transmission. AFS guidance with RTK correction, accurate to 1 inch. The sticker price had been $287,000. Derek had financed $240,000 of it at 4.9% over 7 years. He had driven it 73 miles from his farm near Pontiac to enter the annual tractor pull fundraiser. The event raised money for the county's volunteer fire departments. Entry fee was $50. Prizes were ribbons and bragging rights. Derek had entered for neither. He had come to prove something. Standing in the shade of the beer tent, watching other farmers unload their tractors from trailers, Derek turned to his cousin Randy and said the words that would cost him everything. "I'll bet $10,000 my Magnum will outpull any Case IH tractor here." Randy laughed. He thought Derek was joking. Derek was not joking. Word of the bet spread through the fairgrounds in less than 20 minutes. By 3 o'clock, a crowd had gathered near the pull track. Men came out of the livestock barns. Women left the 4-H exhibits. The announcer heard about it and made it official over the loudspeaker. Derek Millhouse has put up $10,000. He says his new Magnum 340 will beat any Case IH tractor in a head-to-head pull. Anyone willing to match the bet, come see the judges' table. The crowd waited. No one came forward. Derek stood beside his tractor, feeling vindicated and foolish at the same time. He had made a public challenge no one would accept. He would leave with his money and his pride, but also with the knowledge that he had tried to buy respect with a wager. Then, at 3:17, an old man in a faded denim shirt walked up to the judges' table. His name was Eugene Haskell. He was 71 years old. He had farmed 480 acres south of Chatsworth until 1998, when he sold the land and retired. He had kept one tractor, a 1979 Case IH 2594. It had been built in the Tenneco era, before the red paint meant what it meant now. It had 175 horsepower from a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. No cab, no electronics, a 16-speed manual transmission that required double clutching on every shift. The front tires were mismatched. The exhaust stack had a dent from a tree branch. The hour meter read 14,316. Eugene had not come to the fair intending to enter the pull. He had come to watch. But when he heard the announcement, he went home, hooked the 2594 to his trailer, and drove back. He walked up to the judge's table and placed a cashier's check for $10,000 on the clipboard. The crowd went silent. Derek Millhouse turned and saw the old man standing there. He saw the tractor on the trailer. He saw the faded red paint and the cracked seat and the rust along the bottom of the fuel tank. He did not see a threat. He saw an old man about to lose his retirement savings. Derek walked over and offered Eugene a way out. "Sir, you don't have to do this. It's just talk. I'll withdraw the bet." Eugene looked at him without expression. "You made the offer. I accepted it. Let's pull." If you value stories about farming decisions that carry weight long after the moment passes, about equipment choices that become legacies, and about the quiet conflicts that define rural life, consider subscribing. These stories take time to research and craft. They exist to preserve a perspective that moves slower than the world around it. No hype, no shortcuts, just the long view of what it means to make a living from the land. Now, back to Livingston County. Derek Millhouse had grown up on a farm, but not the one he owned now. His father had raised hogs on 120 acres near Streeter. The operation had been small, marginal, and exhausting. Derek remembered his father coming in from the barn at 10 o'clock at night, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and falling asleep before he finished it. In 1991, when Derek was 18, his father sold the farm and took a job at a Caterpillar plant in Pontiac. He died 6 years later from a heart attack in the parking lot after a double shift. Derek swore he would never work for someone else. He had gone to community college for 2 years, then worked as a hired hand on a large grain operation near Fairbury. He saved everything he made. In 2003, He bought 240 acres at $2,800 per acre with a loan from Farm Credit Services. He planted corn and soybeans. He rented another 160 acres from a neighbor. By 2008, corn was over $6 a bushel. Derek bought another 180 acres at $5,200 per acre. He financed it with projected income that assumed prices would stay high. They did not. By 2010, corn had dropped to $3.50. Derek's cash flow tightened, but land prices kept climbing. He saw neighbors selling ground for $7,000 an acre. He saw farmers his age driving new pickups and trading tractors every 3 years. He felt like he was falling behind. In May 2011, Derek's dealer called him about a Magnum 340 that had just come in. It was a 2011 model, loaded with every precision farming feature Case IH offered. The dealership was offering 0% financing for 6 months, then 4.9% for 7 years. Derek's current tractor was a 1998 Case IH MX 240. It had 6,800 hours and no guidance system. It still worked, but it did not make Derek feel he was winning. The Magnum 340 did. He signed the papers on June 22, 2011. The first payment was $3,780 per month. Derek believed the tractor would pay for itself through increased efficiency. He believed the guidance system would save enough on seed and fertilizer to cover the cost. He believed that owning a machine like that would prove he belonged among the farmers who were succeeding. What he did not understand yet was that the tractor was not a tool. It was a statement. And statements have consequences. Eugene Haskell had bought his Case IH 2594 in the spring of 1979 for $42,000. It was not new then. It had 1,200 hours on it. The previous owner had traded it in for a 4490 with a cab. Eugene did not need a cab. He needed horsepower he could afford. The 2594 gave him that. It had a turbocharged diesel engine that ran on straight fuel with no electronics to fail. The transmission was a basic power shift that could be rebuilt with hand tools in a machine shed. The hydraulics were simple and reliable. When something broke, Eugene fixed it himself. Over the next 19 years, the tractor pulled a chisel plow, a disc, a field cultivator, a grain cart, and a manure spreader. It worked every spring and every fall. It never sat in a shed looking pretty. By 1998, the 2594 had 13,400 hours. Eugene was 63 years old. His wife had died 2 years earlier. His only son lived in Arizona and had no interest in farming. Eugene sold his land to a neighbor and moved into a small house in Chatsworth. He kept the tractor. He did not keep it for sentimental reasons. He kept it because it still worked, and because selling it would have brought less than it was worth to him. He used it to mow ditches for the county. He used it to pull cars out of snowdrifts in the winter. He used it to drag a blade across gravel driveways for neighbors who paid him $50 and a case of beer. The tractor sat outside year-round. Eugene started it once a month to keep the fuel system clean. He changed the oil every spring, whether it needed it or not. By 2011, the hour meter read 14,316. The engine had never been rebuilt. The transmission had never been opened. The rear end had never been touched. Eugene had replaced the clutch once, the starter twice, and the alternator 3 times. He had patched the radiator with epoxy. He had welded cracks in the front axle. He had rebuilt the hydraulic pump in his shed using a manual he ordered from a Case dealer in 1983. The tractor was not beautiful, but it was honest. The pull was scheduled for 4 p.m. The rules were simple. Each tractor would pull a weighted sled down a dirt track. The sled had a pan that dug into the ground as it moved forward, increasing resistance. Whichever tractor pulled the sled farther won. The bet was winner take all. $20,000. Derek's Magnum 340 went first. He climbed into the cab and started the engine. The turbo spooled up with a clean mechanical whine. The CVT transmission engaged smoothly. The digital display showed fuel pressure, hydraulic temp, engine load, and ground speed. Derek backed up to the sled and let a volunteer hook the chain to the drawbar. He waited for the green flag. When it dropped, he eased the throttle forward. The Magnum 340 lurched ahead. The rear tires bit into the dirt. The engine roared. The sled began to move. For the first 30 feet, the pull looked effortless. Then the sled's pan dug deeper. The resistance increased. The tires began to slip. Derek gave it more throttle. The engine RPMs climbed. The tires spun harder, throwing dirt into the air. At 62 feet, the tractor stopped moving forward. The rear tires were spinning, but the sled was not budging. Derek held the throttle for another 3 seconds, then backed off. The crowd clapped politely. 62 feet was a respectable pull for a tractor that size. Derek climbed out of the cab feeling confident. Eugene Haskell started the 2594 without ceremony. The engine coughed once, then settled into a rough idle. Black smoke puffed from the exhaust stack. The tractor had no muffler, and the sound was loud and uneven. Eugene backed up to the sled. A volunteer hooked the chain. Eugene sat on the open seat with one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the gear shift. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Derek. He looked at the track. The flag dropped. Eugene let out the clutch and gave the engine half throttle. The 2594 jerked forward. The front end lifted slightly. The rear tires dug into the dirt with a grip that looked prehistoric. The sled began to move. Eugene shifted into second gear without lifting his foot off the throttle. The engine RPMs dropped, then climbed again. The tractor kept pulling. At 30 feet, the sled's resistance increased. The tires began to slip. Eugene did not give it more throttle. He held it steady and let the weight of the tractor do the work. At 50 feet, the Magnum 340's distance, the 2594 was still moving. At 60 feet, it was still moving. At 62 feet, where Derek's pull had ended, Eugene shifted into third gear. The tractor pulled another 11 feet before the tires lost traction completely. 73 feet. The crowd erupted. Eugene shut off the engine, climbed down from the seat, and walked over to the judge's table without looking back. Derek Millhouse stood beside his Magnum 340 and felt the world collapse inward. The loss itself was not the problem. The problem was what the loss meant. Derek had bet $10,000 on the assumption that newer was better. That more horsepower meant more capability. That a $287,000 tractor would outperform a 40-year-old machine held together with welds and stubbornness. He had been wrong, and now everyone knew it. The story spread fast. By the next morning, it was all over the county. By the end of the week, it had reached neighboring counties. Farmers talked about it at the co-op. Dealers heard about it from customers. It became a story people told to make a point about hubris and machinery and the difference between price and value. Derek became the punchline. He tried to laugh it off. He told people it was just a pull, just a bet, just bad luck with tire pressure and track conditions. But the damage was done. His reputation had shifted. He was no longer the young farmer with the new equipment and the bright future. He was the guy who lost 10 grand to a tractor older than he was. The $10,000 hurt. But the humiliation hurt more. Derek withdrew. He stopped going to the co-op during busy hours. He stopped attending county farm bureau meetings. He avoided the diner in Pontiac where farmers gathered for coffee. He focused on his operation. But the operation was not going well. In 2012, Derek planted 400 acres of corn and 180 acres of soybeans. The spring was wet. He could not get into the fields until late May. The corn went in behind schedule. The beans went in during the first week of June. In July, the rain stopped. By August, the corn was stunted and the beans were stressed. Derek's projected yield of 180 bushels per acre dropped to 110. The beans dropped from 50 bushels to 28 at harvest. His total gross income was $156,000. His operating expenses, including land payments, equipment payments, seed, fertilizer, fuel, and insurance, totaled $198,000. He lost $42,000. The payment on the Magnum 340 was still $3,780 per month. Derek called his dealer and asked about trading the tractor in. The dealer offered him $198,000. Derek owed $224,000. He would have to bring $26 to the table just to get out from under it. He did not have $26,000. He kept the tractor. In 2013, Derek had a better year. The weather cooperated. His yields came back. He grossed $214,000 and netted $31,000 after expenses. It was not enough to catch up, but it kept him from falling further behind. In 2014, corn prices dropped to $3.20 per bushel. Derek's gross income fell to $187,000. He netted $18,000. The Magnum 340 sat in the machine shed between planting and harvest. Depreciating, by 2015, Derek owed $176,000 on a tractor worth $162,000. He was underwater and sinking. Eugene Haskell did not think about the pull very often. He had won $20,000, which he deposited into a savings account at First National Bank in Chatsworth. He did not spend it. He did not need it. The 2594 continued to run. Eugene used it the same way he always had. He mowed ditches. He pulled neighbors out of snow. He dragged his blade across gravel driveways. In the winter of 2014, a farmer named Bill Osterman called Eugene and asked if he would be willing to sell the tractor. Bill farmed 600 acres near Cullum. He had been at the pull in 2011. He had watched the 2594 outpull a machine that cost 5 times as much, and it had stuck with him. Bill's main tractor was a Case IH Magnum 305 with 4,200 hours. It was a good machine, but it had started having electrical problems. The dealer said it needed a new wiring harness. The part was $6,800. Labor would be another $3,200. Bill did not want to spend $10,000 on a repair. He wanted a tractor that would not need a wiring harness. Eugene told him the 2594 was not for sale. Bill offered $18,000. Eugene said no. Bill offered $22,000. Eugene thought about it for 2 days, then said no again. The tractor was not worth $22,000 on the open market, but it was worth that much to Eugene, and that was all that mattered. In 2016, Derek Millhouse refinanced his land. He rolled his equipment debt into a new mortgage at 5.2% over 20 years. It lowered his monthly payments but extended the timeline and increased the total interest he would pay. He traded the Magnum 340 for a used Case IH Magnum 250 with 3,100 hours. The dealer gave him $158,000 for the 340. Derek still owed $162,000. He rolled the $4,000 difference into the loan on the 250. He was still underwater, but at least the payment was smaller. In 2018, Derek's wife Laura told him she wanted to separate. She did not blame the tractor. She blamed the stress, the debt, the silence, the way Derek had stopped talking about the future and started talking only about payments. They sold the house in Pontiac and split the equity. Laura moved to Bloomington. Derek moved into a rental near the farm. He kept farming. In 2019, Eugene Haskell had a stroke. He survived, but his left side was weak. He could no longer climb onto the 2594 without help. He could no longer operate the clutch and gear shift smoothly. His son flew in from Arizona and stayed for 2 weeks. He tried to convince Eugene to sell the tractor and move into assisted living. Eugene refused. He hired a teenager from Chatsworth to start the tractor once a month and run it for 20 minutes. He paid the kid $50 each time. The 2594 sat in Eugene's driveway, still running, still ready. In 2020, the pandemic hit. Corn prices spiked briefly, then collapsed. Derek's cash flow tightened again. He missed a payment on his land loan. The bank sent a letter. Derek called and worked out a deferment. He planted 420 acres that spring. In June, a derecho swept through central Illinois with winds over 100 miles per hour. It flattened half of Derek's corn. His crop insurance covered some of the loss, but not all of it. He harvested what was left and netted $9,000 for the year. The Magnum 250 needed a new transmission. The repair cost $14,000. Derek financed it. In 2021, Eugene Haskell died in his sleep at the age of 81. His son inherited the house and the tractor. He listed the 2594 for sale on an online auction site for $12,000. It sold in for days to a farmer in Wisconsin for $13,400. The tractor was loaded onto a trailer and driven north. Eugene's son used the money to pay for the funeral and settle his father's estate. The 2594 had outlasted the man who owned it. In 2022, Derek Millhouse was 50 years old. He had been farming for 19 years. He owned 420 acres. He owed $340,000 on land that was now worth $480,000. He had $140,000 in equity, but it was locked in dirt. His equipment was aging. His body was aging. His optimism was gone. He thought about selling. But selling meant admitting that the bet lost in 2011 had been the first domino in a chain of decisions that never recovered. He thought about the 10,000 he had lost that day. He thought about the Magnum 340 he had bought to prove he belonged. He thought about the old man on the 2594 who had not been trying to prove anything. Eugene had simply shown up with a tractor that worked, and that had been enough. Derek had shown up with a statement, and it had cost him everything. In the spring of 2023, Derek listed 180 acres for sale. It sold for $8,200 per acre to a neighboring farmer who paid cash. Derek used the money to pay off his equipment loans and half of his remaining land debt. He kept 240 acres. He rented another 120 from a neighbor. He bought a used Case IH Magnum 180 with 5,400 hours for $78,000. It was not new. It was not a statement. It was a tool. Derek planted corn that spring and worked the fields alone. He did not talk about the pull anymore. He did not talk about the bet, but he thought about it. He thought about the moment he stood beside a brand new Magnum 340 and believed that owning it made him a better farmer. He thought about the moment Eugene Haskell pulled 73 feet with a tractor that had no right to win. And he understood finally what the old man had known all along. The machine does not make the farmer makes the machine work. In August 2024, Derek attended the Livingston County Fair. He walked past the tractor pull and did not stop. He bought a lemonade and sat in the shade near the livestock barns and watched families walk past carrying corn dogs and cotton candy. He thought about his father, asleep at the kitchen table after a double shift. He thought about the farm he had built and nearly lost. He thought about the weight of wanting to prove something and the cost of proving it to the wrong people. A teenager walked past wearing a Case IH hat. Derek did not feel pride. He did not feel nostalgia. He felt tired. The sun was setting. The fair was closing. Derek walked to his truck and drove home. The Magnum 180 was parked in the machine shed, covered in dust from the summer's work. It was not the tractor Derek had imagined owning when he was 38, but it was the one he had now, and it was enough.